Back for the final time to discuss literary devices in To Kill a Mockingbird. This is our third video on the topic, covering our last 3 literary devices if you're a St. Paul School student in 2023. So, last video, we discussed 4 literary devices: symbolism, imagery, similes, metaphors, and point of view. Those should be done in your documents, and you've only got 3 more to work through. Woohoo! Let's get going. These last 3 are pretty easy and quick. So, juxtaposition, if you are my student, we have been working on all year long. I shouldn't have to give you this definition, but I will anyway. So, juxtaposition is purposefully placing 2 things next to each other for emphasis. Generally, these things are unlike, but they do not have to be. Duality is one type of juxtaposition and does require that our 2 ideas be opposite opposing forces, good and evil, light and dark. We looked at that a lot in Romeo and Juliet, right? If it's, 2023 and you're my student. My example here is chapter 8. The first half of chapter 8 is our beautiful snow day, and the last half of chapter 8 is the fire. Harper Lee juxtaposes these 2 sections on purpose. She is going to do so to emphasize a theme, so I have chosen that this is really a figurative language device. Harper Lee juxtaposes the tranquil tone, diction, imagery. It's really like tone and mood, really, too, because it's not just her opinion, but our feelings on it. Tone, mood, diction, and imagery of the children's snow day in the first half of the chapter against the terrifying tone, mood, diction, and imagery of the fire in the second half of the chapter. This thematically emphasizes the moment as a loss of innocence for Scout as we see her learn. I actually don't like this one to be finished. You guys can finish this one up here with me. Her experiences in life are going to become much less tranquil and much more chaotic as the story continues, right? So one more sentence to talk about how that shows her losing innocence. And have I really fully done that? Her experiences in life are going to become much less tranquil and much more chaotic as the story continues, showing how Scout will lose innocence as she grows and matures. That's better. Reconnecting to the theme I'm explaining. Cool. All right, pausing again. I know I probably need to pause for you to finish that. Okay, great. As for juxtaposition in chapters 11, 12, or 13, look for, this is also a good characterization device because we need to look at how different characters act that are often juxtaposed against each other. You can think like a Mercutio and Tybalt, if you remember your To Kill a Mockingbird learning, or you can think about different characters that we interact with or different ways characters interact with the same information, that those 2 interactions would be purposefully placed next to each other to emphasize who these characters are. Or are we showing mature characters next to immature characters? Or characters with different opinions on what it means to be courageous? Or characters who are at different stages of sort of growing up and learning their experiences. Something like that. Repetition is repeated stuff, right? There we go. I'm just going to add that in. Diction is repeated sounds, such as the use of alliteration or assonance or diction or anything else for emphasis. If you are repeating something, maybe it's a symbol or the use of a theme or the use of a word or the use of a sound, we are repeating that on purpose. If we're repeating sounds, such as there's a great line that we just read about with in chapter 10, with movements so swift they seemed simultaneous. That alliteration, right, is emphasizing that moment. It's giving me that figurative language moment. It's slowing us down. It's creating the pacing. It's making it art. But also, repetition can emphasize a character and show what characters truly believe, such as the use of the word girl. And now Jem is always calling Scout a girl and how that is rude. Like, that shows us about his character, but I think I actually, instead of talking about it as a character, I talk about it as showing theme here. So I wrote, by repeatedly using the word girl in a derogatory manner, Lee is able to characterize Jem as a boy who's simply a product of his time. He looks down on women like other Southern men. This shows the impact of Southern values on this community, contrasting with our values today. In addition, this repetition can reinforce that being a girl was seen as symbolic of weakness. And this is where we could even add the characterization piece. That being a girl was seen as symbolic of weakness, and Jem buys, wow, into these stereotypes. Like, that teaches me about who Jem is, you know? The final one for today is suspense and pacing. This is a bit of a longer definition, but it is a good one. And again, whoever is running this video should pause it for you. Cool, I'm back. So suspense and pacing, which is most often a plot device because it really is slowing down the plot of the play. It's kind of in the, definition, but often can equally show us like how characters are going to react to these things. Suspense and pacing is the speed, the speed at which a story moves, created with other figurative language devices. So when an author uses figurative language like diction, mood, similes, metaphors, and imagery in order to really slow their writing down, this is going to create suspense. And my example does just that. It uses a simile as part of this. So I mentioned the simile in my example. Because if you're going to discuss suspense and pacing, when you analyze it, you probably have to tell me what other literary devices she is using or what other figurative language devices she's using in order to create this slow, suspenseful moment. So I picked the bottom of 109, 110, which is, I believe, in chapter 10. It says, he walked quickly, but I thought he moved like an underwater swimmer. Time had slowed to a nauseating crawl. Using a simile, Harper Lee compares swimming underwater to tiny, whoa, I skipped a line. Sorry, dyslexia. Okay, using a simile, Harper Lee compares swimming underwater to the slowing of time, creating suspense. She continues by zooming in on tiny details like the lenses of Atticus's glasses to force the reader to slow down and notice the symbolism of the glasses. So I've connected to my previous analysis. Additionally, by using a slow pace, the reader knows that this moment is emphasized for Scout. This is a core memory in her life, influencing her character. So not only do we talk about how this is emphasizing slowing down the play, but also, the novel, but also it also is a figurative language device in that it supports symbolism, and it's a character device in that it influences her character. You'll have to go find your own moments of suspense and pacing. I know I can think of one in chapter 11, but 12 and 13 have them too. All right. So those are the only 10 you have to analyze, but we're still going to grab a couple more notes because you should be able to apply these 3 in To Kill a Mockingbird as well. So let's just grab these notes quite quickly before I conclude this video and set you off to work. So irony is when the opposite of what is expected occurs. Yep. How that applies, there are 3 types. Situational irony is generally the most common, though I do hear a lot of verbal irony from middle schoolers. But situational irony is the opposite of an expected outcome in a given situation. So, and again, we talked all through this in Romeo and Juliet, so I'm not really going to stop and give examples here. Verbal irony is the opposite of what is meant is what is said. So it often looks like sarcasm, but is not necessarily always. And dramatic irony is the one we are deeply familiar with, or you are expelled from English class. It is that the reader knows what the character simply does not, and therefore that character experiences an opposite of what is expected, but we know what is to expect. So this is still, like, from the character's perspective, it might be a situational irony, but it's not because we know better, and that gives it that dramatic element. So my example is that we expect Boo to be scary, but it seems like he's providing gifts to children and laughing at their antics and putting blankets on them. So in this situation, the opposite of what is expected is what is occurring. The whole situation with Miss DeBose is the same. We expect her to simply be torturing these children, and yet she's there to teach us an incredibly powerful lesson. Personification is what I like to say personification. I always wonder why kids can't remember what this one means. All right. It is giving person-like or human qualities to inanimate or non-human things. When things are spoken about as people, they are personified. So my example is here that the tinfoil was sticking out of the knothole just above eye level, winking at Scout in the sun. Tinfoil does not wink. And finally, we have foreshadowing. Oh, I don't have to type it. Silly Rose, that's the whole point of the copy and paste move you got going on here. Blam. Pause. Great. When a writer gives a hint of what is to come in a story, often without the reader realizing it at the moment. So for example, chapter 1, the very first line of the book says, when he was nearly 13, my brother Jem got his arm badly broken at the elbow. We are still waiting to figure out how Jem breaks his arm. And you will not find out for a very long time. In chapter 11, Atticus mentions that summer is coming and there's lots that is going to happen, and it is all sort of, like all these lessons we're learning are preparing us for this. So that is more foreshadowing. But I also don't want to give anything away, so I don't want you looking for foreshadowing that you may not know of yet. I do have some delightful memes for you. Shout out here, this sweet Will Smith slapping Chris Rock meme is a Bobby meme from the 2021-2022 class. So shout out. Thanks, Bobby H. You made me laugh once, and I'm keeping the meme. All right. And then to end us off, remember, I am grading you on this project. It is a 50-point project test grade, which means that I have provided you a rubric. I am looking to see examples of literary devices that are thoughtfully chosen, the best possible choices, and they are correctly identified literary devices. I find sometimes kids will provide me a whole bunch of stuff from chapter 11, and what I'll find is that they have chosen examples that are correct, but maybe I've already pointed them out for you. You're not going to earn your full credit if you're not trying hard to figure it out yourself. Even if you guess wrong, but you are trying so hard to connect these literary devices, like, you'll earn points in this area. Your analysis needs to be lengthy, critical, well-developed. When I say lengthy, note that some of these were only 2 sentences long, but some of them were closer to 4. I expect that variety, because if you're answering every single one of these analyses in 1 to 2 sentences, you're probably not being critical enough or developing your point enough. You're probably not explaining how it is shown and how this affects a reader. Remember, you kind of have 2 questions per analysis to answer. Your writing has to improve the inclusion of the lit device, there's the first part, right? As well as address the author's purpose. So there's both points. You have up to 30 points in this area. This is where the most variety will happen, because this is, where I evaluate your writing. And then a lovely 5 points off the top is for what I'm going to call GUMP squared, which just stands for grammar, usage, mechanics, proofreading, and professional tone. So if your grammar is appropriate for 8th grade, reflecting our class lessons, meaning you're trying to insert some phrases in there, or you're using combinations of independent and dependent clauses, great. Your usage, meaning that your diction is strong and it does not look like a first grader wrote this. Your mechanics, meaning that you are proofreading and looking back through this and spelling correctly and using your punctuation, and that you have not made any silly errors that were auto-corrected, and that you care enough to go back and reread those with proofreading. That your tone is professional. That you are writing this as if I am reading an essay. And yes, there are some of you that I can think of right now who tend to skirt this line of professional tone with reference to being funny instead. Consider that professional tone is part of my rubric, and even if I love your ridiculousness, make sure that your analyses answers are professional, and then include ridiculousness in other places, please. That will be out of 50 points. As a quick reminder, I'm going to scroll all the way to the top. This is a week-long project. You should be on the 3rd day of this project, your 3rd class period. You should have hit our deadlines and goals and only have 3 more to do, in which case you shouldn't have very much homework left for you. But this is due finished before school on Tuesday, April 11th when we get back. No need to share it to me. These are already shared to me. You're typing in your own documents. You don't need to make any copies or anything. So I should be able to get right back to this. I will end this video by inviting you, now that we've looked more closely at all of our symbolic or all of our literary devices, to think more about the symbolism that you see in this image. Notice Gem and probably Scout, I suppose, what they're looking at, what you see, who these characters might be, what's going on in this tree on either side, and what that could represent. And yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about beautiful literary devices. I know I'd said I'd end up there, but shouldn't I instead end on the slapping meme? Have a beautiful afternoon, morning, or time of your life. I will see you soon if you are at St. Paul's School, and if you are not, be great and make good choices or something. And I love you. Miss Rose, out.